Welcome back to another edition of the podcast. And on this edition of the podcast, it is our VNL monthly. The lads are back. We are all discussing the latest news surrounding the National League and analysing what's happened over the past month. Of course, last time we were joined by Sam Collyer and Rob Worall. I'm pleased to say that they are back once again. But we've also got another edition tonight. An edition from, I don't know if you class Boston as the North, but from Boston, of course, Christian James, who's a National League analyst as well. Christian, firstly, how are you doing tonight and how's Boston?
Well, yeah, great. Thanks myself and hopefully you guys all are as well. Obviously, Rob, an NL full-time colleague. So seeing you most Sundays the last few weeks. And yeah, Boston, it's ups and downs. Obviously, only the league to focus on after spending more last week. But yeah, a good result yesterday, which we'll come to. And we're just about treading water, I think, and not quite writing ourselves off yet.
Fair enough then. And of course, Sam, yourself, it's good to have you back on the podcast once again, discussing everything National League tonight. Of course, we're working at the moment. First defeat under Neil Ardley at the weekend, but it was, of course, against High Flying York.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be back once again. It was always going to be a tough game against York. They showed their quality. We held our own for a little bit, but in the end, a couple injuries to our side, key players missing. Although they had a few as well, their quality shone through in the end, and we just got played off the park a little bit second half. But all work in progress under Ardley, so can't really complain too much.
Yeah, now I do want to go into a little bit more depth about all our clubs very shortly, but of course as well tonight we are joined by Rob Worall, of course host of the NL Full-Time podcast. Rob, firstly, how are you doing tonight? Of course, Aldershot didn't play at the weekend, but of course we can discuss Aldershot at the moment if you would like to, because I know they are struggling a little bit, perhaps. Maybe not struggling, but because you're not playing, you're getting closer to the drop zone.
Yeah, personally, good to be back. Good to see you all. Just managed to get a week's holiday. I did obviously follow things from abroad, as you do when it's your passion. Generally things very, very good at the minute. It's you won't hear too many people saying this, apart from perhaps me, but in all competitions, Aldershot Town are unbeaten in 10 matches now. You're absolutely right. In the league table, they could be better placed, and they will have half an eye over their shoulders, particularly when they're not playing and therefore not picking up points. But I think it might be 4 wins and 6 draws, and across all competitions. It's quite an exciting time as well to be an Aldershot Town fan, because we're in the quarterfinals or the semi-finals of 3 different cups: the National League Cup, whether you want to be there or not, the FA Trophy, and the Hampshire Cup. So, we're actually enjoying a better time than people probably think at the moment.
Yeah, I think on paper, looking in, when I look at Aldershot at the moment, they're a side that feels like they're getting closer and closer to the drop zone. Of course, I believe they have got a game in hand on those sides below them. But are you a little bit nervous, even though, of course, your form's half decent? You're a little bit nervous and looking over your shoulder a little bit, particularly when you see the likes of Fylde and Maiden, they're picking up points at the moment.
Yeah, of course. It's a natural human reaction, isn't it? And despite whatever's gone on to this point, the league table doesn't lie, does it? You've got the points that you've got. What I have seen, and I've mentioned it a couple of times on Spaces or podcasts with yourself, is I've seen a lot of indication that Aldershot are not a side without talent and ability, and I do see they're very, very together. They're actually a very difficult team to beat at the moment, but the frustration has been a lack of wins. Saturday's game that didn't take place would have given us some good indications, wouldn't it? It was against Fylde. You'll have to tell us how they went to the Shea and won in the week. That one really surprised me, and you let us down there, Luke.
Yeah.
But yeah, that would have been a big game between those sides, just outside the relegation positions. I hope that long term the Shots won't be involved in a relegation battle, but certainly looking at the league table at the minute, you can't discount them.
You've got to remain optimistic. Perhaps Fylde were doing you a favour against us, and you could have finished. You could still finish inside the playoffs this season. I think you'd have to win every single game, but you've got to remain optimistic, I suppose.
Listen, people within the club will obviously tell you they don't look at the table and the other results and all the rest of it. I'm all across all of them, and I was really annoyed. I was really annoyed at Halifax midweek losing that game. I'm sure even Sam, who's in a lofty perch, at least one place and 1 or 2 points above with Woking, would have been annoyed at that one. You might want to skirt over it and talk about the wins either side of it for Halifax, they're obviously going well, aren't they? Your side, continuing to overachieve and just sit just inside those playoffs.
Yeah, of course, we are recording this on, I do believe, the 9th. Halifax played on DAZN yesterday against Tamworth and actually managed to defeat them away from home. Surprisingly, I actually thought we played better on Tuesday night against the side that had only got one away win all season and lost prior to that game. Than we did actually on Saturday, beating a Tamworth side that had only been defeated 3 times at home all season prior to that game. And they were 8th in their home form table as well. So for me, overall, you look at Halifax at the moment, our away form is on point. It can't be any better. I think we are second in the away form, but we do have a game in hand in terms of away games on first place, Oldham at the moment, which is just excellent for ourselves. I think what is holding us back is that home form. And that's a topic that I wouldn't mind coming on to tonight. Christine, you're someone, of course, you probably look at Halifax, a side very strong away from home. Of course, we came to Boston, won there. We've done pretty well so far at both Boston and Aldershot this season away from home. But you look at that home form, 17th in the league. What do you feel the difference is between Halifax at home and away?
Well, firstly, from a Boston point of view, I'm quite pleased to see it because, of course, it is Boston that come to the Shea next Saturday, kicking off at 3:00, and I'm looking forward to covering that one with local radio. I think it's always an interesting one when a side does better on the road than at home. I don't know whether you maybe feel that the pitch at the Shea has an impact on that. I know it's the same for both teams, but if you find that actually you can cope better with conditions away where it's maybe a little bit easier to get the ball down and play. I know from my experience with Boston, there have been a couple of years where we've had quite a young group or a group that struggled with confidence, and they've often done well going away from home and picking up results, and then they've come back to Boston and found the Boston crowd to be quite a harsh one at times. I don't mean this season in that, albeit we have fared a little better on the road, if not points-wise now, certainly kind of anecdotally. But I can think of a couple of years, there was an Adam Murray year and a Craig Elliott year where we were a lot stronger on the road, and it just felt as though there was a weight off the players' shoulders. So I think it can be psychological, and it can be down to conditions. And again, you'll maybe tell us whether they've been unlucky with the fixtures so far. I know, again, touching back to Boston, we've got a lot of the teams at the bottom end still to play away from home. So sometimes the fixtures can just sit, unfortunately, particularly when you've only got 7 or 8 home and 7 or 8 away still to go. So it could be a number of factors, but I suppose the key is if you're going away and getting points off pretty much everyone, as long as you're kind of ticking over at home, the kind of impetus of those two can be reversed if that's what's working for you. And obviously across the two, it's enough to sit 6th in the table.
Yeah, I think it is quite frustrating at the moment, that home form compared to away, because if you could slightly improve that home form and get a few more wins on the board, we could be comfortably inside these playoffs. I think you look back at Tuesday night, we were 6th in the league. That was, I think, our game in hand on a few sides around us. Rochdale actually lost as well to Oldham. It was a massive opportunity to really comfortably put ourselves inside the playoffs. Yet, dropping points, not just dropping points, but losing to a side that had only got one away win all season was very, very frustrating. It felt a little bit different on Tuesday to what the other defeats at home have all season. It felt like it was a case of changing the team too much around from a side that had done very well the previous Saturday, beating Ebbsfleet, trying to tamper with that team too much for me personally, and that's perhaps why we lost. I actually think we played half decent overall. So for me, the home form, I can only see it improving still. I think last season our home form was in a similar position, and we managed to get that into a bit of a more comfortable position towards the end of the season as well. So yeah, I'm not too concerned about that overall. I know a lot of the Halifax fan base are. Sam, just coming to you then, Chris Millington, a manager that does feel like the Halifax fan base overall is finally coming around to appreciate what he's done for the club. When you're looking at Halifax at the moment, how much credit has to go to Chris Millington, do you feel?
Yeah, I think he deserves quite a lot of credit for the job he's doing. When Pete Wild left Halifax, it was, there was always the question of whether what he did at the club was going to be able to be replicated. And Millington's kind of taken the reins quite well, and he's gone and stuck to the similar lines of maybe being that tightly structured, well organised team that bases their football and the way they play off of the defence and a strong core in the team. I think that's where a lot of Halifax's successes come from. If you can keep organised and if you can, you work hard, you get the engines running in midfield and you get the stability at the back, then that's where you're going to pick up results in some places where teams will end up dropping points. That is that's probably the best way I could sum up Halifax. Millington is, like I said, he's pretty significant in the way that Halifax have played. Going back to the point on whether the home form and away form, the difference between that, I think maybe that play style could be a pretty significant reason. When you're a home team and you're basically setting up to almost not lose at times, it can be a bit frustrating. But when you go to away games, teams are often going for it a bit more at home. They want to try and make their ground a fortress, pick up these home points, take that home advantage, and make good use of it. The way Halifax play, it kind of plays into that. So having seen Halifax play on Saturday, I think I wasn't too surprised to see them go to Tamworth and pick up 3 points. We touched on it a little bit on the live podcast the other day. The way that Halifax set up, it kind of plays perfectly into the hands of playing a team away who might go for it a bit more. And, it played out that way pretty much perfectly. They didn't really cause too much problems. There may have been a bit of a scare towards the end with the penalty and with the added time, but, it was too far gone and they picked up the 3 points. But, Millington's done a great job. He's taken his time. I know there were a few questions raised in the first year or two when he was there, but, sixth in the league on a small budget, you can't really complain, can you? It's been a pretty he's working with the utilities he's got and he's making the most of it.
Of course, Millie Ali left Exeter to join Luton, and I mentioned that because he's a previous Halifax Town player. Halifax always have a sell-on clause for players that move into the EFL, and I believe that's 10%. I believe he went for $1.1 million. So that means that over 100 grand has come to Halifax. Andrew Oluwabori leaving the club as well for, I'd like to think, quite a healthy fee, considering he was still in contract. He's moved actually to join Exeter now and left us. I'm going to ask you, Sam, do you think that overall, when you look at Halifax, that they need to recruit a little bit more? Do you feel that it's not necessarily needed at this moment in time, even though we potentially may have the funds to?
With Halifax, one thing that kind of stood out to me, especially in recent years, is they don't seem to utilise the loan market very much. They'd much rather have permanent options in and that stable squad in pre-season, and they only seem to really add to it when they desperately have to. There doesn't seem that kind of like that want to improve the squad as the season goes on. I do think, defensively, I don't think you can particularly argue. I think, you've got that core back five that play very well together. I think they are, if you can keep them where they are, you don't need to touch them really. Losing Oluwabori, that's, he's had his inconsistencies, but he adds something very different to that Halifax team. He's very quick, direct. He's capable of beating a man. He is raw in areas. His end products maybe, lacks in at times. There were some games where a bit anonymous, but ultimately he has won you games this season. I think he finished on 7 goals, couple of assists. In a team that doesn't score too many goals, I think he left as your top scorer at the time. I think Jamie Cook may have overtaken him now, but that is pretty significant when you look at it. And I do think, I do think maybe another side would look to recruit to replace him, But Max Wright's been injured for a fair spell this season. He's back in the team now and he's playing quite well at wing back. He adds a bit of pace to the side. So I think if they were to go and just stick with what they have at the moment, I don't think that would, I don't think that would lead to them being in any trouble. But I feel like in the National League, when the transfer window closes around March time, I feel like you should always be actively looking to try and improve your side. But like I said, Halifax, they do seem to kind of keep that core. So I can't really see them recruiting many more, if any, towards between now and the end of the season, unless they desperately have to.
Rob, just coming to you then, finally on Halifax, currently sitting 6th in the league. We've spoke about that away form being significantly better than the home form. I want to just ask you, Millington, your personal opinions on him as a manager. And are you perhaps surprised that no one else has come in for him? Or perhaps it might be a case of sides have come in and he's stuck with Halifax?
Yeah, it could be either, to be fair. I think he's really well respected. I speak to a lot of managers and, of course, they're always wise enough to be complimentary about other managers. That's just what they do. You don't put them down. You don't give them something to pin on the dressing room wall. But I think Phil Parkinson at Altrincham and Chris Millington at Halifax, I think, continually always get really good praise for working well with what they've got and getting the best out of it and improving players. Just coming back to your home form, I think all the factors you've talked about are valid. And probably the elephant in the room is the over expectation that's always there with Halifax fans. I think we have to talk about it. Maybe it's the elephant in the room, but it always is. I was speaking to someone who was at the last home game that you won and you were 2-0 up. And there were still people crying, get it forward. I don't know if that really gets through to the players or if it affects them. I think Sam's probably closest with the playing style, which is probably more effective and easier to play away from home than it is at home in front of your own fans. But that's the bit that I never quite understand with the Halifax fans, why the expectations are well above your par, what you should be achieving.
What would you, just sorry, cutting in there, Rob, what would you say, and I'll ask all three of you this as the podcast goes on, what would you say Halifax is, where they should be? Where do you think they actually should be positioned in the league at the moment if it was based on budget?
I don't know everybody's budget, but my impression is that Halifax would have a bottom 8 budget in this division. That's why I say if they're in the top 8, then they're overachieving. It's as simple as that. I don't have the facts and information that could say that they've got the 5th smallest or the 9th smallest budget. But my perception is they should be in the bottom 3rd and they're in the top 3rd. That's it. That's my answer.
Sam, coming to you then, where would you say Halifax overall should be?
That's a really tricky one. I think mid-table. Maybe if you're basing it purely off the budget and how they recruit as well, like I mentioned, maybe not utilising the loan market for whatever reason as much as other teams do. I think maybe a mid-table finish, maybe lower mid-table, it would make sense. And I think that just kind of highlights how good of a job that Millington has done. And yeah, I mean, they work a small budget at that club extremely well. There's a utilisation of more local clubs as well, even if it isn't through the likes of loan deals. The likes of Leeds, localish. It's been they've been utilised quite a lot recently. The likes of Sutcliffe, Jack Jenkins, and Luca Thomas coming in. So yeah, I'd say maybe lower mid-table if you're going purely off a budget and recruitment strategy.
What would you say then, Christian?
I think it's hard, isn't it, when we see Halifax consistently overperforming and the respect's there for Millington. Kind of they set their own high standards, if that makes sense. But absolutely, money talks, and most levels of football, your budget kind of dictates within 4 or 5 places where you're going to be. And my instinct is that Halifax, purely budget-wise, probably a top half of the bottom half at best. Pretty much, as Rob said, even pushing for that bottom 8. So yeah, they do a fantastic job, and there comes a point where you do maybe not get complacent, but you do get used to the fact that Halifax overachieve and you adjust your expectations accordingly. But there's no doubt Chris Millington does a good job on a modest budget, on a modest resource. And the fact that people expect them to do better is probably a big compliment to him, even if it comes across as a criticism.
A question that I'd like to ask you all is as well, I'm guessing we've all done National League predictions at the start of the season. For each of our clubs, are they where we actually put them? Are they exceeding the expectation of where we actually put them in the division, or are they below? Christine, I'll start with you then. Where did you put Boston at the start of the season?
Well, we did do a recording, Rob and I, and discuss this. So it is there if people want to listen back. There's no point denying. I did say Boston would stay up. I think it's very hard with the optimism of having been promoted without having really taken the temperature of the league. You always want to be optimistic. I said that I felt Tamworth would really struggle, particularly, and that I felt Boston might just have enough. And it didn't prove that way. There was a reluctance from the previous manager in Culverhouse to recruit, to widen his squad. And in a division where the games come thick and fast and Boston are against it and needed different options, it was a little bit daft, to be honest, in hindsight. And then Graham Coughlin's inherited a difficult old task. And yeah, Boston are where they are. They're still 9 points adrift, despite having kind of sharpened up a little bit and changed their style. So yeah, Boston are underperforming what I suggested would be the case. I did kind of say if Boston have got a chance of staying up on the last day, they've had a good season and that's still in play. But listen, there's no doubt they're going to have to work extremely hard to achieve that expectation now.
Sam, about you with Woking and the start of the season, of course, it kind of feels like a different season for Woking now because since Neil Ardley's come in, there's been a takeover. It doesn't particularly feel like that first half. You can compare it to just what so far the second half. But where did you expect Woking to come on, and are they where you expected them?
So yeah, with our budget in the summer, it was significantly cut based on the financial issues we had. Nonetheless, I did think we actually recruited quite well. I thought we added some really strong names, the likes of, Harry Beautyman, Dale Gorman, etc. I did expect us to finish maybe between that 12th to 9th position. I believe I put us 10th or 9th in my predictions at the start of the season. It didn't work out with Michael Doyle in charge. The performance levels of the team, the consistency in tactics, it was nowhere near what the real expectation was, and it wasn't near what we saw at the end of last season. But now under Neil Ardley, it seems, like you said, it seems to be a bit of a different situation. We've got Todd Johnson now as the majority investor at the club, Jody Brown in the director of football, Bassi is an assistant manager, and Neil Ardley. It feels like that those four have come in, and since they've they've changed the whole dynamic of the club massively. Barely stepped a foot wrong, if any at all. So yeah, I think now we're playing a lot closer to the level that I expect us to play at throughout the season. But it didn't work out at the start of the season with Doyle. We did have troubles with money. So maybe I overshot us a little bit in looking at those aspects, but they're definitely not compared to what I originally thought. They're definitely not near where I thought we would be, that's for sure.
Aldershot then, Rob. Whereabouts did you put Aldershot, and are they at a similar position of where you predicted them?
When you factor in last season for Aldershot, or you have to, because it was an overachievement by a long way last year for them to finish 8th and just a point or two and a place outside the playoffs. Expectations naturally went up with that, but I've been around a while and watching them for a while, and they've in all the previous 4 or 5 seasons prior to that, they were in that little pocket between mid-table and the bottom 4, and a little bit closer to the bottom 4 than us Shots fans would have wanted. I believe, I'll have to double check it, but I believe that basically on more of a par achievement this season would be something like 14th to 16th, and they're currently 19th, so they're below par, that's for sure. I think there's an acknowledgement of that when you talk to the Aldershot town management team. I think performances have been slightly better than the points ratios we've picked up. I think probably every supporter or every manager would say that we should have had X amount more points than we have. But it is the case, and the only tangible I can really point to is that Aldershot have hit the woodwork more times than any other team in the National League this year. We've had a few hard luck stories this year, that's for sure. But, you know, we are hardworking, we're hard to beat. I think you've got Josh Barrett and Jack Barham. Josh Barrett and James Henry already into double figures, all competitions. Jack Barham's just a goal away from that now as well. And I think if we can get 3 players finishing on around about 15 goals or whatever, that have done quite well trying to replace the talent and the goals of Josh Stokes and Lauren Tollage, who have obviously moved on to bigger and better things. Just a little footnote, really. We focus on these players when they come to our clubs and they go on to do bigger and better things. I'm just really excited. Midweek Aldershot don't have a game. I'm going to go along and watch Josh Stokes play at Birmingham City on Tuesday night for Cambridge United in League One. He's on loan from Bristol City. Really, really lovely invite as a guest of the Stokes family. And I'm really excited about that. I don't watch much football outside the National League, but somehow in my 58 years on the planet, even though it's only an hour and 20 minutes away, I've never managed to go to St Andrews before. So looking forward to that one in the week. And it's really nice to dip out of National League and just see how some of these up and coming young players are getting on further up the pyramid.
Yeah, there certainly is plenty of them from all our clubs. Of course, Boston had their own players. I think made the move to Accrington. Myself, Halifax has a number of players that I could mention there. You can actually now for Halifax, you could have a full squad. If any of you know of the game FIFA, you could have a full squad on FIFA, everyone in the correct position, goalkeeper and everything, and an actual sub bench as well of ex-Halifax players that have made it into the Football League. So that's one of the proudest things about Halifax currently at the moment. But yeah, of course, Halifax myself, I think I predicted as 9th, and we're currently 6th. I'm going to be honest, I'm quite optimistic at the moment, and I genuinely feel that we could maintain a playoff spot this season because the squad, in my opinion, looks better than what it ever has. I think it was a slight blow losing Oluwabori. I don't think it was essential that we kept him if we've got a healthy fee for him, I should say. But he does offer something different. Like I think you nailed it. I'm not going to say that because I can't even pronounce it right. But I think Sam kind of hit the nail on the head. There we go. With Andrew Oluwabori earlier about him being very inconsistent, but he does offer something different, and that is something that he does offer. And it does feel like now, even against Tamworth, perhaps that game, it needed a player to start running at players to kind of make it a bit more exciting. I'm not going to complain because we got all 3 points, but it wasn't the prettiest of games. I think Tamworth might feel like it was a bit unfortunate for them that they didn't manage to pick anything up from that game. I think Filed as well. We missed Oluwabori too in that game. So yeah, I think it is a little bit of a loss, but I wouldn't say he's irreplaceable, and that's something that we need to be doing now. I think we need to be going out and looking at bringing in a few attacking wingers, perhaps, to come in as well. I think moving on then to one of the next topics, and of course we spoke about Aldershot, we spoke about Woking, perhaps. I don't know if you'd include them in this now, but the relegation battle. If you look at the moment, Braintree have picked 11 points from the previous 7. I think a lot of people were backing them to go down a couple of weeks ago, and now they're all the way up to 17th. They're actually above Aldershot and Woking. The current bottom 4 are AFC Fylde, Wealdstone, Boston and Ebbsfleet. I think potentially we'd say the 3 sides, Boston, Wealdstone and AFC Fylde, are the only sides capable of staying up. I'm going to be honest, Christian, a few people have written off Boston by now, probably including myself, I'll be honest. I'm going to ask you guys, analysing it at the moment. Christian, you look at Aldershot, perhaps. Do you think they should be looking over the shoulders at the moment? Because they've never been in any significant danger of actually being in the drop zone, but it does feel like now they're getting a bit closer.
It's an interesting one. I remember I spoke to Graham Coughlin, who came in at Boston the first week, which would have been about the 23rd of November. And he said then that Boston were in an 8-team mini league. And I remember kind of making a note, thinking, oh, crikey, we're including Aldershot in that. The 7 being the 4 you've just read that are still in the bottom 4, Boston obviously included. Maidenhead, Woking and Braintree. And then there was a little gap up to Aldershot. And I thought, oh, crikey, I wasn't including them in it at that stage. It got to Christmas and that gap was just closing a little bit. And obviously speaking to Rob regularly as I do, you kind of keep more of an eye on teams when you've got, someone that supports them or whatever. And yeah, it is just closing that little bit. They obviously had the issue that's no one's fault and thankfully seems to kind of be over the worst of it in terms of the manager's illness, which won't have helped. And I would certainly say there are 4 worse teams in the division than Aldershot, but you can be unlucky and go down, can't you? And we've seen examples across the Football League or the football pyramid even of teams like Blythe Spartans last season in the North. They weren't in the relegations places all season and then dropped in on the last day. And of course, it's not where you start, it's where you finish. So I'd be wary. I certainly wouldn't say they'd be my favourites to go down. But the gap's now only 2 points and Braintree and Woking have had reasonable form. And we know what Maidenhead are like this time of year. So you do run out of candidates if you're not careful for teams to finish above and keep yourself above the dotted line.
As for Wealdstone, another side currently struggling at the moment. I wouldn't say Aldershot are struggling, actually, but of course not playing. And sides have had games in hands where they managed to catch up to them. But Wealdstone are another side that are struggling at the moment, winless in 7. Of course, manager Matt Taylor's actually moved on it and jumped ship to Solihull Moors. I'm sure we'll speak about that shortly, but I've got quite strong opinions about that. Alex Reid has returned to the club. Hasn't particularly had the same impact. He's only been there for, I think, 3 games. He's got the 1 goal so far. He's not had an impact on the results, I should say, so far since he's made the return like he did in his first spell, although we're very early into his second spell with the club. Rob, are you concerned for Wealdstone this season? Do you think it could be the season where they potentially finally drop?
Yeah, very much so. It's like Christian was just saying, isn't it? Because obviously your regular podcast sidekick is Paul and he's Wealdstone. And, I feel for him sometimes trying to kind of find the positives for them. And obviously Alex Reid coming back is a big one. But I am concerned. I hate it sometimes when you watch something and somebody looks at the table and go, oh, yeah, it'll be the current bottom 4. But I'm going to be honest. I'm going to put my hand up right now and say that the league table that shifted yesterday with Maidenhead jumping out of it with their win, that I think is the most likely 4 to go down. I personally absolutely accept that it's an 8-team battle, Christian, in the bigger picture. I think when you go in a bit deeper, I think it'll be 4 teams from the bottom 5, most likely. And I think that the 2 sides most likely to jump out of it are Maidenhead because of the experience of Alan Devonshire, and Fylde, frankly, because of Nick Horton, because they've got someone who can win a game on his own. I am concerned for Wealdstone because they are part-time. I'm concerned because of the changes in management. I'm concerned for their lack of form. And I think they're the side most likely to join the other 2 most likely teams, Boston and Ebbsfleet. Christian will rightly point out to a little bit of an upturn of form for Boston, but there's still too many draws. I do think Ebbsfleet are gone. Boston are probably going to have playoff form to have any chance now. So I just think Devonshire, I can't even tell you where, but he will find the wins. He gets them every single year. So my biggest concern, if Maidstone are going to be safe, when concerning myself about my own club, they just need to do what's within their remit, what's within their control, and pick up a nice ratio of points from now to the end of the season. I'm slightly more concerned about Fylde. I do think if Horton gets really firing again, they could pick up 3 wins back to back and really start to pull themselves clear as well.
So you think Braintree then, you think they're out of it because of their recent form? You think they've done enough now to pull away? Just quickly, because obviously you just come to me on the last ones, I'll just finish off. I don't think they're out of it, Braintree. They could still hit a slump, and a dip in form. But I think it's really good signs there. They've had to go through changes of players, changes of budget, change of manager. And they've actually continued to pick up points. I think the general indications that Braintree might well
overachieved this season, a bit like Tamworth, because most of us had those two in our bottom fours at the start of the season. Tamworth have got a magnificent chance. I think I think Tamworth are out of it in terms of the relegation battle, and I think Braintree, if they can keep up some of the consistency they've had in the last couple of months, they could pull themselves out of it before the end of the season. Yeah.
Another side as well that we've not even mentioned there in between Braintree and Tamworth is actually Dagenham. Under Lewis Young, the form has been, I think, horrendous, to be honest, is the only way you could put it at the moment. I know me and Sam touched on them on Thursday evening. 1-1 draw against Yeovil at the weekend. Prior to that, the form was horrendous. And I think you mentioned, Sam, that you think they'll be fine, but you think that if you were a Dagenham fan with the current form and the change in management clearly not working at the moment, that they could potentially be looking over their shoulders a little bit.
Yeah, I was going to mention when speaking about this, the 18 mini league. I was going to say I think Dagenham are a side that are very much well and truly in that as well. The whole club and the whole feeling around the club at the moment seems to be very restless. The departure of Elliot Justin, I think that's brought out the real kind of feeling. The fans are very vocal about what they feel about the people making the decisions at the club at the moment. The appointment of Lewis Young, there's always been the speculation of whether it was the right approach, whether putting him on this multi-year deal was the right decision. Some speculation has basically lent towards the idea of maybe it might have just been the cheaper option. But there seems to be this unrest, and there doesn't seem to be an identity around the way they play, and they seem to be kind of in this weird limbo of not really knowing how to play, not really knowing who to play, and it's kind of just costing them, and it all seems to be a bit restless. So I'd definitely put Dagenham in that kind of bottom mini league of teams that are struggling. And to kind of push that as well with Dagenham, I think the three teams below them in Braintree, Woking and Aldershot, they're three teams that are probably looking more upwards rather than down behind them. Obviously it'd be silly for them to not, keep an eye over their shoulder at the teams below them. But those are three teams that have found a good little vein of form at the moment. I think they're kind of, there was a big gap between that 17th and 16th for a large spell this season of about 5-6 points, and now that's only 1 point between 18th and 16th. So I think Dagenham are a side that really need to be careful. As mentioned with Maidenhead as well, I think, Devonshire, I've always grown up on the idea and always been told the idea, and I've predicted Maidenhead to go down many a time. Devonshire always seems to find a way, no matter what he's got, what to work with, no matter what he faces, there always seems to be a way he manages to keep his side up. Although, I will say, this season, I think this is the most technically gifted side Maidenhead have had. Probably for the whole time I've been watching National League football. But I don't think that suits Devonshire. I think he needs those, those big towering centre backs, and he needs he needs people that are going to battle and, make a game gritty. They've got a few more technically gifted players in that side at the moment. I don't think that's going to suit the way that they want to play, and that's going to suit the way that they need to play to get out of this relegation scrap. So I think that also does throw a bit of a spanner in the works. Obviously, you touched on Filed Nick Horton. He can create something from nothing, and that's the lifeline Filed are hanging on to at the moment. So it's a really tough battle down there at the moment, and I'm kind of on the same page as Rob. I think at the moment, if I was to have to pick four, I think it would probably be the four in that bottom drop zone at the moment.
Christian, finally coming to you. Bottom four, who would you have your money on at the moment?
Just first to continue on Maidenhead, we say about they will find a way. Their last four fixtures actually are really good opportunities for them. They go from sort of through to the last day of the season. They go Woking at home, then they go to Wealdstone, then they go to Ebbsfleet, and then they host Boston on the last day. So those fixtures are kind of quite nicely lined up for them. I think I agree absolutely. Ebbsfleet, the 16 points off, with only 13. I think it would be a miracle for them. For Boston, those 4 points against Barnet and York, for me, just keep them on by the kind of slimmest of margins. If it was 16, you throw them in with Ebbsfleet for sure. The key for Boston is they haven't scored away from home since Ian Culverhouse left at the end of October, and they've got all of the teams around them to play on the road. They've got Wealdstone home and away still, so that's the home one. But they go to Fylde, they go to Maidenhead, they go to Aldershot, they go to Braintree, and they go to Dagenham. All those teams have been to Boston. Only Braintree lost there. So the key, as much as you can kind of look at the home form, the way the fixtures are set, and the fact that we did lose a lot of away games to weather, they're going to have to do a lot more than fail to score for 3 and a bit months on the road. I think Boston, you'll know very, very soon. They've got Fylde and Wealdstone and Dagenham as 3 of the next 4 games. If they don't, frankly, get 7, if not 9 points, I think we're going to be writing them off. Wealdstone, it's difficult, and it's been well articulated by you 3 as well, their issues. I also think for them, a concern has to be that pitch. You know, everyone else has only got to go there and play on it once. Wealdstone have got to play on it another 10 times or so. And I saw some of the photographs from Solihull and Gateshead's visits. It doesn't look conducive to a great deal. It's going to be heavy. And as much as you can criticise the impact it has on the game as an individual, it's also got to hamper the squad in terms of injuries and just be kind of heavy of foot. And when they are part-time, I'd assume they haven't got the resources to keep kind of refueling that squad. Fylde, they're so hit and miss, aren't they? They're just not doing it on the road. I know they won on Tuesday night at the Shea, but I mean, it's only 3 results from 15 games on the road for them. So again, as much as they've done a bit at home, it needs to come away, doesn't it? Horton scored 14 goals, but they're just not backing it up. As I say, 3 results and only 9 goals on the road. You can throw them in with Boston, really. So I'm going to be really, really boring and agree with both of you as well. I think Maidenhead will have enough. I can't see any of those teams sliding into it. And frankly, I can't see any of the 4 teams in the bottom 4 kind of getting to 45, 48 points. And I think everyone else has got more than enough to do that.
Well, cheers, lads. The pressure's on me now to mix it up a little bit. I look at the bottom 4 at the moment, and it can very quickly change. I could have you all back on in 2 weeks' time, including myself, and we'll have different opinions on who we feel could go down. For me personally, Ebbsfleet, I think we can all agree. Boston, I feel, yes, they're down, I would say, overall. However, you've mentioned there, you've alluded to the next couple of games, having Fylde, Wealdstone, both away, and Eastleigh at home as well, and Dagenham away. Those 4 games for me are going to be crucial. And like you've mentioned there, you need to be getting 7 to 10 points, I think, if you want to even be involved in getting out this season. For me personally, although you look at the previous form, a point against Barnet, a win against York, they'll be looking to build on this when they actually go to the Shea on Saturday. So you never know for Boston. But for me personally, Wealdstone, it pains me to say it, but at the moment, the form they're currently on, they need to really turn it around very, very quickly. Because otherwise I feel like they're going to be heading towards the same way as what the Bostons and the Ebbsfleets are, if I'm being honest, and I think it's going to be a massive uphill battle for them. Of course, Alex Reid returning, he's returned, and they haven't really, he seemed to have a significant impact on the results as soon as he went there, and they went on a good run of form, whereas this time he's come back, and since Matt Taylor's left as well, it pains me to say it, the results haven't been coming. There've been a lot of defeats in there, a few draws as well, and they need to start winning games. A win for any of those sides towards the bottom, your Wealdstones, your Fylde, your Maidenhead, we all know how significant that can be. A win for Wealdstone would actually get them out of the drop zone. But what concerns me is they had a number of games in hand. They were sat 20th, I believe. They had 3 games in hand, I believe, on sides around them. Yet now they sit 22nd. They haven't got any games in hand on AFC Fylde and Maidenhead, who are both above them by 2 points. And Aldershot, who are above them by 4 points, have actually got a game in hand on them as well. So it does feel like they're going to have to really pull something out of the bag. And at the moment, I personally can't see it. As for Fylde, I actually think whenever I actually see them play, I think they're a very good football inside. I think they've got some great individuals in that team. Not just Horton. I know Horton kind of steals the headline there, and he's the type of player that could win a game on his own. But, the likes of Massey's there. We spoke about Tyler Roberts as well, didn't we, on Thursday, Sam, and he's a young player that's doing quite well there as well. And I thought when they came against Halifax, I thought they were a half-decent team overall. But it does feel like it's a team of individuals and they don't play the best as a team. And that might be the concern for them. And also, it's only the second season back in the National League. Maidenhead have been in this position year on year for the past decade or so, to be honest. So they've got that experience of knowing how to survive. But like you mentioned there, Sam, they're technically a lot better this season, but the way Alan Devonshire likes to play defensively, they need to be really strong. And at the moment, they're projected to concede over 100 goals. And for that reason, I'm going to swap AFC Fylde and Maidenhead around and go for Maidenhead, Wealdstone, Boston, and Ebbsfleet to go down. Anything finally to say on the relegation battle before we move on?
I've got a quick point. Yeah. Two things we haven't discussed in any of this are two things that tend to happen at this time of year. There's been no evidence of it whatsoever yet, but there tends to come a period that I call the silly season, where all of a sudden teams in the bottom 6, bottom 8 start beating teams in the top 8, and it tends to happen with regularity. The main reason why it's not happened so far, I think there is a big difference in quality between the top and the bottom this year. But the other factor, the big factor, how good a footballing team anybody is going to start to go out of the window for those sides fighting relegation, and it's who can scrap. And this is one of the reasons why certainly in the past Maidenhead have always pulled clear. Really good point that Sam makes. They might be a slightly better footballing team this year, but is it at the loss of that ability to fight? And then the matches between those teams become ever crucial. They do become what we in the media like to call 6-pointers, and what the managers hate, because they'll tell you there's only 3 points up for grabs. That's actually, because I'm sure you want me to show some vulnerability here for Aldershot. That's my biggest concern, that our form against other sides in the bottom 6 or 8 is pretty poor this season. We've beaten or certainly drawn and not lost to an awful lot of sides in the top 5, 6 or 7 this year. We've only lost a couple of games against the top 7, believe it or not, who take us on in a straightforward football match. But we've got to scrap and fight, haven't we? And Woking are going to have to scrap and fight, and Boston are going to have to find some sort of blend between scrapping and fighting and playing wonderful football. So it's going to be a fascinating period. And I just can't help thinking as well, the irony, Luke, that you've got us 3 on here while Halifax are sat in 6th place.
A bit of a gap. I evened it up tonight by bringing a Northerner on, and now I've got 3 guys that are all in the relegation battle, and there's just me just happy looking. You guys are all involved in a relegation battle, and there's me just buzzing that we're in a promotion, we're a promotion contender. So yeah, it's good being a neutral looking at the relegation battle.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you let us off the hook now and move on and talk about something else? Because it's difficult, lads, isn't it? Nobody wants to ever sit here, whatever they believe their inner beliefs are, and say, yeah, my team's rubbish, it's going down, you know. I think Sam and I have a really good fighting chance, and I think it's really difficult for you, Christian. As I've said to you a couple of times off the podcast, you're going to need... What do you think you're going to need? If we stop talking about whether you're going to do it or not, what do you think Boston need points-wise to have a reasonable chance of staying up?
I think it's going to be 47-48 total. So that's another 27-28 points from 19 remaining fixtures. It is tough. I think if we're trying to conduct a kind of glass half full, how can it be done? My first positive is that we do have all of those teams, barring Ebbsfleet, left to play. And listen, we left 4 points behind, drawing twice with Ebbsfleet just either side of Christmas, that's for sure. The second thing is that I feel with a club that is kind of that underdog, you know, probably on paper going to be ones that miss out, it's going to be momentum that's key. And after this midweek, Boston have got 6 midweeks in a row. Now, that could go both ways. You know, in 3 or 4 weeks' time, we could be saying Boston absolutely ravaged with injuries. They're going to go somewhere and get turned over, kind of big star, which hasn't happened yet because they just got to the end of the tracks and that's that. Or they start to pick up a bit of momentum and the games can't come fast enough. A lot of it's travelling. The schedule's awful in the next 6 weeks, but it becomes slightly less awful if you start fancying your chances at some of these places. And we're going to know very, very soon whether Boston are still going to be in the conversation or if we're kind of just discounting them straight away like Ebbsfleet. But the opportunities are there. The 2 results against York and Barnet are something to hang your hat on. And given the fact that Braintree and Maidenhead have just picked up a couple of results. Actually, those 4 points are kind of the difference between Boston not being fully out of it just yet.
Now we're 50 minutes into the podcast. The majority of the conversation's always all been towards the bottom half of the division. We've not even spoke about the actual headline of the podcast, and that is our Oldham promotion contenders. Now, you guys can read into that in whatever way you'd like. If that's a case of you thinking, are they in a title race and that's the way they could get promoted, or is it a case of are they kind of suited to the playoffs? And that's a question I'm going to ask all of you. So Sam, firstly coming to you, Oldham, we've spoke a lot about them. Of course, 3 away wins on the bounce for them now. They've got the best away record at the moment in the division. Michael Fondop's having the season of his life. It does feel like there's a difference to this Oldham side now than the side before Christmas that was doing very well, though, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely. They've seemed to really rally the troops now, and they seem to have, got out of this rut they seem to have found themselves in. The question itself, do I think Oldham are promotion contenders? Do I think they're in contention to be promoted? I do. But do I think they're title contenders? I don't. I think this dip in form for them is been pretty significant. I can't see teams around them or the teams that are competing for the title. I can't see them, having that kind of dip in form to the point where they are the worst form team in the league. But one thing that does stand out to me, and I feel like it's the really key issue for Oldham, is when you look at Barnet, you look at Forest Green, and you look at York. There's an identity about all those teams, and I feel with the way that they play, they set up to play a specific way, and you can rotate players in and out of those squads, and there'll be a lot less damage dealt to the way that they play, and how they play and how they perform. I think the system that the managers set out and deploy, I think that's what has them 3 teams up in the positions they are. I think they've signed to play those systems. When I look at the squad that Oldham have built, I do think that they have some very, very good players. The addition of Tom Pett, the addition of Jordan Rossiter, Jake Leake, etc. I think they're all very good additions. But I do think there's a huge margin of error there for Oldham. I do think that they are very individual reliant. And I think that if you are to take an individual out of that starting at their strongest 11, I do think that will damage them a lot more than it would damage the likes of York, Forest Green and Barnet. For example, we saw that with Stones and we saw that with Clucas. They both ended up leaving. And for that small period in which they didn't have a high quality replacement in yet, they did really struggle. And that huge cog in the team that kept them ticking, it disappeared. And there was, they capitulated for a month. I do feel that it is almost a like for like now with Clucas leaving. I do think Tom Pett's come into that team. I think he looks really, really good. But his fitness is very crucial to the side now. I think, if he can stay fit, I think they'll do a good job. But they are, a player or an injury away from, really struggling to almost keep up. But like you said, they've added they've brought back Fondop into the side, and he's playing exceptionally well now. He scored some goals. I think I touched on it on Twitter the other day. His goals and assists alone, in terms of when they're scored in matches over the course of them, has gained them 23 points this season through winners and equalisers, which is an absolutely exceptional statistic, if I'm being totally honest, especially for someone who hasn't particularly been a shoe-in to start every single week. He's definitely having the season of his career so far. The likes of Billy Waters have come in. He's off the mark now after the weekend. I think that could be very significant for him. But yeah, I think for them the aim should just be trying to finish in that second or third place. So they don't have to play it's obvious really in the playoffs. You don't want to play 3 playoff games if you are in it. You want to reduce the amount of games you play and give yourself the best chance, because the playoffs can be an absolute potluck. And momentum is very important. So yeah, I think finishing second or third for them would be the aim. But I think, looking at trying to maybe win the title for them would be a bit of a stretch now.
Christian, coming to you then, looking in at Oldham. do you see them potentially as promotion contenders, if that's it, the title, or do you feel that there's a side better than them equipped for the playoffs as well?
I certainly think they'll make the playoffs. I think if we're discussing kind of who we feel is going to do well in them, I guess we kind of need to discount whoever we feel is going to actually win the league, which I know is a completely different conversation that could become an hour of its own. I think if Forest Green were to miss out on the title, I feel that they're very well equipped in terms of finding a way, never knowing when they're beaten. Certainly they would be at home in a semi-final. They're going to be top three, so it's going to be a home game and then Wembley for them. So I would certainly back Forest Green of those top three to be kind of shoo-in for getting to a final, and then we see what happens. For Oldham, my initial instinct when you asked the question was, I don't think they're quite of that quality. But then I thought, well, who is it that I'm going to suggest that finishes above them? And Gates said with the players that they've lost, have struggled in January, they just don't feel like they're quite in that rhythm at the moment. We've said that we feel that Halifax are doing exceptionally to be where they are. Now, they could kick on. Who knows? You can kind of find yourself falling upwards sometimes. But I think they'll be more than content with finishing in the top 7 as opposed to worrying about finishing above Oldham necessarily. And then you're down to, Altrincham 9 points away, Rochdale 11 away. So I think it's difficult to make a case for any of those other teams to finish above them. So I'm going to have to say, I think Oldham are 4th, and especially with the fact that 10 of their last 17 games left to play are at home. They've got a nice balance of home games there. They've only lost 3 times at Boundary Park this year, and only conceded 13 goals as well in 13 games. So I guess almost by default, I can see Oldham finishing 4th, and then their home game. And then I think the task to go to any of those top 3 in the playoffs is going to be difficult. But how often do we see 2nd v 3rd in a playoff final? It doesn't tend to quite work out that way, particularly in the North and South, but the National League as well. So promotion favourites, no, but promotion contenders, absolutely. And I think they'll be playing a home game in the playoffs.
Rob, coming to you then finally, Oldham. Do you see them getting out of this division this season?
They certainly have a fighting chance. They're in the promotion race, yes. I'm going to have to be honest here. A couple of weeks ago, I went in my head. I'd already just kind of knocked Gateshead for reasons which we've already discussed out of the title race and gone down to 4. And then Oldham's inconsistency and what I saw with my own eyes 2 or 3 weeks ago, I dismissed them from the title race. And I want to give them credit now. They've gone away 3 times this week. Just to do that, just to go on the road 3 times is tough. To win all 3 of those games, only concede 1 goal. I think they've forced their way back into the picture, and I think you have to respect that. Do I think they can go on and win the title? Yes, they can. Do I think they will? No, I don't. And it's for similar reasons to the other guys, really. I don't think that all 3 teams above them will underachieve in the remainder of the season. So even if 1 or 2 of them did, at least one of the 3 is still going to go and kick on and get the points needed to finish where they need to finish. And also looking at the 4 sides, I see a slight vulnerability about Oldham that I don't really see in the other 3. And I saw it the other week where everybody who was at Boundary Park would have seen it, I'm sure, as I did, that Oldham played really well for large chunks of the game against Aldershot, but they showed this vulnerability, and Aldershot hit them 3 times and scored and came away with all 3 points. And I can't imagine Aldershot doing that against Barnet or Forest Green or York City, to be honest with you. So I'm going to consign them. We have to. There's no good us sitting on the fence here. I'm going to consign them to the playoffs. I also think they will finish 4th, maybe 3rd, but certainly not higher than that. And I think they'll be really dangerous in the playoffs. If they can just get themselves from 4th to 3rd, that'll be quite an achievement actually for Oldham to get above one of those other 2-3 teams to be into a semi-final stage in the playoffs and have a home game. And they'll be dangerous. They'll be dangerous in the playoffs because Mickey Mellon has won the playoffs before with Tranmere. He's got the quality of player and he's got the management nous and experience. So, Yeah, that's my take. I don't think we're all too far away. I don't think we're saying massively different things, lads, are we? What do you think, Luke?
Title race, highly unlikely, I personally feel. I think there is a gap between those three clubs. I think there has been for the entire season. Before Christmas, I think if they'd have kept that side together, Oldham, Clucas and Stones, I think they would have potentially pushed for that title race. I think we did some updated predictions before Oldham went on this bad run. And I actually put them second, and I put York to win the title at the time. And I felt like it was going to be a title race between those two sides. When you lose Lucas, a midfielder that should not be playing in the National League, when you lose a midfielder like that could probably still do a job in League One, if not the Championship, it's going to have an effect on any team. And then to lose, Josh Stones, who was producing a large number of goals as well, that's going to take its toll, and it certainly has done. I saw Oldham against York a few weeks ago. I felt like they kind of flashed back to last season's bad habits, the way they were playing. Felt like they were playing long ball, and they didn't really have a game plan. I know you mentioned it, Sam, a couple of months ago on the podcast when I think we had you on, and you actually said that the difference between Oldham and the three other clubs is the fact that I feel like it could implode there. And that is something that I think has actually happened. It's kind of, you got a lot of stick for that, and it's actually, your point's been proven. Although they lost a number of players, they went on a bad run of form. The fan base, for a small period, kind of turned. It certainly did after that York game. And to be fair, understandably, it was an awful performance. But what I will say about Oldham is the way they've been able to get back on track now, to win 3 away games in a row, it's probably done them good, actually getting away from Boundary Park, to get back on form now. And now to have a home game at Boundary Park where the fans are back on side, for me personally, I feel Oldham are in a lot more comfortable position. And I think they're a more settled side now than what they were a couple of weeks ago. The issue is now, during that bad spell, they dropped a large number of points, whilst York, Forest Green and Barnet all added to their points tally, which means that points difference is even bigger now. So for me personally, I just think it's too much of an ask for Oldham to actually go on to win the league. I think the expectation now for Oldham is to maintain a playoff spot, potentially see if they can climb into the top 3, go on a good run to the end of the season, get good form for those playoffs. And you never know inside the playoffs. They're a big club. They'll attract a big crowd in the playoffs. So for me personally, I'm not writing them off promotion yet, but I am writing them out of the title race. And I think that's something that we all agree on. In terms of the top 7 then, just looking at the moment, are there any sides apart from the top 4 for you guys that you feel are certain to finish inside the playoffs this season?
For me, I'm actually, that's tricky, because I don't think 5th, 6th or 7th are particularly safe at the moment. Rochdale have a few games in hand, and that could be a huge deciding factor to what happens in the playoffs this season, depending on whether they can, I think they're all 3 games in hand they've got are home games as well, or 4 games in hand, because obviously they've had some issues with their pitch. But that could be a huge deciding factor about what happens, because they could very much go, a couple of points off of Oldham, and that could, throw a complete spanner in the works if they go and win all their games in hand. Gateshead, for me, I look at them and I think, they're not in the greatest. They're not in the greatest form off the back of a 4-0 win, albeit. But they've struggled to pick up points as of late, and I feel like for them, they're probably looking at it and thinking, can we just about cling on to this top 7 rather than how early can we solidify ourselves in it? Halifax, like you said, the budgeting and how much money can be invested in the side compared to the teams around them may play a factor. But I do think Halifax is the way that they set up and the way that they look to play, the way they take points from people away. I think they'll probably be in the top 7 by the end of the season. But I think that also comes back around to Solihull and as well in 9th, and it is kind of whether these 5th, 6th, and 7th teams want to get in. It is very dependent on the 3 teams below them. I worry for Solihull now, and I think they could very much drop into that that mid-table area. I'm really, really unconvinced about the appointment of Matt Taylor in terms of maybe kicking on to the playoffs. I think it was going to be a big ask as it is appointing Andy Wing. appointing someone to replace Andy Wing. But I look at Taylor and I think, with the most respect possible, of course, what has drawn Solihull towards Taylor? I don't think there is particularly anything standout he's done at Wealdstone this season that justifies him stepping up into another full-time job for a team higher up in the division, really. So yeah, it is very much. It is quite close. It is quite compact in around those that fifth to ninth spot. But I think at most, I think Rochdale will probably make it into that playoffs. But I think it is very difficult to put a finger on which one of those three would drop out.
I think for me, looking in Solihull aside, appointing Matt Taylor, it was a very strange one for me. Losing Andy Wing, I don't think they actually wanted to lose him, but they did make a point on social media stating that they're looking to appoint a manager that can get the best out of this squad, because they felt at the time, when I think they were 8th, in a lot healthier position. I know they've only dropped one place, but they had a lot more points. Well, they were in a lot closer to the playoffs than what they are now. When they were 8th, losing Andy Wing, they said they wanted to appoint a manager that can get the best out of the squad because they feel this squad is capable of a lot better things. And I agreed with that. I actually thought that Solihull should be a side that should be in the top 7 when you look at some of the individuals in that squad. But for them, when they've just gone on a good run of form, to just be outside of the place, to lose Andy Wing is a massive inconvenience. But it's a strange one for me that they couldn't find a better replacement than actually taking a manager from a National League side that's struggling, having to pay a fee for him as well, which they will have had to because he's under contract at Wealdstone, paying a fee for him to come to Solihull Moors. And it just feels like such a backwards appointment. And you look at the form at the moment, they're winless in their last 5. They've only picked up 1 point in that time, which actually came against Matt Taylor's old club as well. I'd fully discredit them from this playoff race now, for me personally. I think Solihull, like you've mentioned, will be falling into those mid-table places under Matt Taylor for me. Christian, have you got anything to add on that replacement? And then, of course, looking at sides that could potentially fall out the top 7 as well.
I quite agree with everything you've said with Solihull, really. That was a real shock. I think the Andy Wing departure was disappointing when you lose a manager because he's been picked up for a higher level. You're obviously losing someone with talent. But at the same time, they weren't quite as high as certainly I'd predicted them to be at the start of the season. Gates said it. They're at a bit of a crossroads, aren't they? I think they could very easily float out of the playoff picture. They do need to show more this calendar year to kind of sustain the place they're in. I think Halifax have got a good rhythm, and the fact that they've got things to work on for me leaves them there. And we've discussed Oldham. One side that I don't think anyone's mentioned at all and have not had a kind of blockbuster run of form and yet have just crept up that table is Hartlepool. Mm-hmm. I don't know what you guys think about them. They were excellent when they came to Boston, and equally they haven't won too many games. Just looking down the results, but they ran Gateshead close, then they beat Oldham, they slip up against teams at the bottom end, and then they get a good result at Sutton. I think they're a side that could just gate crash the picture in April, and if they are going to get in, they're probably going to have to put away sides around them, so they would then take quite a confidence into that picture. And I think you can be quite dangerous when you haven't any expectations. And I don't suppose Hartlepool have got any expectations as a fan base of being promoted this season. So should they make it, I think they'd be dangerous. I really like Altrincham. I think Altrincham and Rochdale is an interesting one in that they both play each other in the FA Trophy in the next round in the quarterfinals. And I feel whoever wins that game for me is then the favourites for the trophy. It's obvious in terms of the league standing. I also just feel both of those sides have been really, really keen to push themselves in that competition. And I wonder for the side that does get through, does that derail the league a little bit? Rochdale, another one. I don't want to hark on about pitches, having done so with Wealdstone, but you just worry that the Spotland pitch is not great. They did pull out all the stops, get that Oldham game on. They had Boston travel there the week before, which was a complete farce, and they've lost a few games already to the weather. And if the FA Trophy is going to get involved, the schedule's only going to get even worse. So there will be a side that ends up playing Thursdays in April, and I don't think it's conducive to good results.
I 100% agree with what you've said there about Rochdale and Hartlepool. You know, Rochdale as well, something else to add is they're actually in the National League Cup as well. And if they win that game against Wolves, I believe they actually go into the next round, which means they've got even more games to play, the FA Trophy as well. For me, it's going to mount up for them. I think Boreham Wood was another club a couple of years ago in a similar position to Rochdale, had a number of games in hand, but win all the cup competitions, FA Cup, FA Trophy, and it caught up with them and they ended up finishing like 10th or 11th. And I just feel for Rochdale at the moment, they're a side for me that I'm really not convinced on finishing inside these playoffs now, particularly because the likes of Altrincham just look on fire at the moment. You know, they're a side going under the radar, a very strong side. They've probably got two of the best individuals in the league in Linney and Newby. For me, they're a dangerous side for me overall, Altrincham. And they're certainly on form at the moment. And as for Hartlepool, like you've mentioned there, I won't write them off yet. I think they've got a good squad as well. I think there's a lot of individuals in that squad that have played at a lot higher level. Of course, Diasaruwe, Gary Medine being another player, Nicky Featherstone. He's full of quality, that side. So Hartlepool, they're a side that could easily go on a good run of form and finish inside the playoffs. So Rob, coming to you then, you know, you look at those sides around the playoffs, your Altrinchams, your Hartlepools, Rochdales, your Solihuls. Do you see any of them getting inside the playoffs? Well, Altrincham maintaining the playoffs, but would you see any of the sides outside finishing inside the playoffs this season?
I'm going to be the most kind of definitive with my opinions here. Building on Sam's point, yeah, I get it to a certain extent. They're almost where they want to be. Can they tread enough water to stay there? Yes, they can. They've got 17 games left. If they drew them all and got 17 points, they finish on 69. They're going to be in the playoffs. Their battle might be more to hang on to fifth place, and they might have to find themselves with an away quarterfinal, you know, that kind of scenario. I like Altrincham. I think they're the most consistent of all of this little group of teams that we're looking at. I think they've got solid. They've got an identity. They've got a good goalkeeper. It's pretty solid defence. They don't concede too many. They've got goals. They've managed to replace the goals quite well of Chris Clark, and they've got a good manager. I like Altrincham. They'd be my shoe-in for the playoffs. And then I'm going to come to Rochdale. I'm sorry about this, Luke. It's the only reason. I think Halifax will be there or thereabouts, but I think you might be 8th or 9th. Yeah, Rochdale have got those dreaded games in hand and their issues with the pitch at home. But I might need to remind you that Halifax had these problems last year and went on to make the playoffs, didn't they? Rochdale are a very good side. They're the best side on their day of all of these sides that we're looking at. They do still have 20 games left. And they're right on it, aren't they? 2 points off the playoffs. I think Rochdale will make the playoffs alongside Altrincham right now. Do I respect the others? Of course. Halifax, can they continue to overachieve? I'm not so sure, but I think they'll be probably in the top 10, maybe 8th, 9th or 10th. Solihull Moors, it's difficult to build a case for them to really surge back up now, isn't it? Hartlepool, the most dangerous of the three sides with a bit of, or four sides, sorry, with a bit of history, really. Hartlepool, Sutton, Southend, Yeovil. I'd put Hartlepool at the head of that pack. Eastleigh might come down to whether or not they can get back in it, whether or not they can get Paul McCallum back on the pitch. So, yeah, I think if I had to name your top 7 right now, it would be the current top 3 will be the top 3. Oldham will stay 4th, maybe get up to 3rd. Gateshead will hold on to 5th. And then Altrincham and Rochdale will come 6th and 7th. And I'm sorry, Luke, you'll come somewhere very soon after that.
You said that. I remember last year, though, Rob, you said Halifax would finish just outside of the playoffs and Aldershot had pinch a spot and they didn't. So,
we saved our worst run of the season, unfortunately, for the last 6 or 7 games. I think we got 2 draws and 4 defeats or something. So that was our own silly fault for not getting across the line.
Okay, then. But what I will say as well, difference between Rochdale this year and Halifax last year. Halifax last year had a poor home form as it was. Their away form is what got them over the line. If you actually look at Rochdale's home form, that's what's particularly strong. Their away form's not awful, but it's the 11th best away form in the division, where their home form, I think, is 4th or 5th. So they rely on that home form quite significantly. If you come towards the end of the season and you've got a home game Saturday, home game Thursday, and then a home game Saturday, home game Tuesday, then a Thursday match, it's all going to, for me, melt up. And I think when you rely on your home form, you're not going to be picking the results at home up what you might have done earlier on in the season. And that's why I personally feel that Rochdale will come just short. Christian, I'll ask you then, top 7 then. What is it in order? From 4th to 7th, I should say.
Okay, yeah, so for me, top 3, I think we're kind of baking all of those in. Oldham 4th for reasons discussed. I think Altrincham 5th. Hartlepool, Halifax 6th to 7th for me. I think Rochdale could go one of two ways. I think Rochdale could make us all look very silly, blitz straight through and finish kind of 5-6 points in it in 5th. But I just fear at the minute, I would make them very, very slight favourites to beat Altrincham, especially with being at home in that FA Trophy tie. I hadn't appreciated actually the National League Cup points. So that's an excellent one as well, which kind of only adds to the case. I feel Rochdale, could maybe just the wheels fall off in April. So yeah, for me, that's my top 7 with Hartlepool as my dark horses.
Fair enough then. And Sam, for you, top 7?
It is extremely, extremely difficult to predict this because I'm extremely indecisive out of that kind of 5th to 8th mark. Who's going to get in there? And I did say, I literally said about five minutes ago that I think Halifax will probably have a good case to get in there. But I look at I'm looking at it now, and I do think that might be a bit of a task. So that kind of that 5th to 7th position, I think I want to say Gateshead will finish 7th. I think, if you look at the momentum of the division at the moment, I do think that they are kind of on a bit of a downwards decline at the moment in comparison to the teams around them. And I think that also takes into account the fact that Altrincham are absolutely flying, like you mentioned. So I'm going to go Gateshead 7th, Rochdale 6th, Altrincham 5th, Oldham 4th, and that top 3 is an absolute potluck at the moment. I'm massively impressed with how Barnet have flown under the radar. I'll say flown under the radar, but I feel like there's been a lot of eyes on York and Forest Green for a while now, and suddenly Barnet have kind of just popped up and ended up top of the division. I'm still quite confident in York winning the league, so I'm going to go with 3rd Forest Green, 2nd Barnet, 1st York. So just to do that, York, Barnet, Forest Green, Oldham, Altrincham, Rochdale, Gateshead. That's my top 7.
Right, I'll do my.
You came on all cheerful tonight, didn't you?
Yeah, I know. To be fair, Christine's backed us for the playoffs, to be fair. So that's all that matters. We know it's just southern bias, to be honest. On why you've not
extremely difficult, to be fair. Yeah, it's a very, very tricky decision. I mean, I'm looking at that at face value. I think Halifax probably do have absolutely everything at the moment in terms of, the way that they set up. They're extremely hard to beat. But then you just look at the teams around them and you think it is a tough prediction to make, and it's a very difficult league. So it's a really tough one.
I think for me, at the moment, I'm very optimistic. I think those games coming up, you've got Southend away where we don't particularly have a good record in previous years there. Boston at home, everyone knows the home form. Boston fighting for their lives. Will be desperate to come to the Shane, not only get a point, but get all 3 points. And then you've got Rochdale at home, which is going to be huge. And then York away. You look at those 4 games, to me, they're huge games that are going to really say a lot about Halifax's season overall. We could easily have, after those 4 games, be outside of the playoffs and looking to fight our way back in. However, after those 4 games, we could be comfortably inside these playoffs, above Gateshead and actually looking to get a home tie. in the playoffs. I think that wouldn't actually be a good thing for us with our away record, but the playoffs, it's a little different for me. So for me overall, I think those next few games are going to really say a lot about Halifax this season. It's my own team, one form at the moment. I've got no reason not to put us inside the playoffs, so I am going to. I think from 4th down, Oldham, I think they're nailed in for 4th for me, if not to go any higher. It feels like at the moment they're the most comfortable side to join those 3 in kind of confirming a playoff spot. Gateshead, they were a weird one for me because it, before Saturday's result, I'd be saying, yep, I think Gateshead could easily fall outside of these playoff spots. But then they go to Wealdstone away from home and put 4 past them. For me, overall, it's really hard to say. I do kind of want to put them outside of the place, but I'm going to put them in 7th. And I think I can't see past Altrincham at the moment. I'm going to put them in 6th. And then I'm going to put Halifax in 5th place for me overall. So, yeah, I think, have we done all the top 7s now, I believe? Rob, have you done yours?
Yeah, I think I've put all 15 teams into the top 7.
You could put any. We haven't even mentioned Sutton. They're a side game in hand on Hartlepool and Solihull. They could finish inside the playoffs this season as well. But
and they've got a Gucci class striker, haven't they?
Yeah,
on fire at the moment he is.
Mm-hmm. In Will Davis. Of course, looking at the top 3 then, Sam, you went off on one and went too far in a way.
Oh, yeah.
I'm only joking. It doesn't matter. But just analysing the top 3. Rob, a bit of detail on these 3, and then in order for me, please.
This is really hard. This is the hardest of all of them.
We do it every month, so you can put any if you want.
Yeah, I know. It's the hardest of all of them. I think you're asking us. So in my mind, I think that Forest Green have got the best depth of quality, not the biggest squad, but the best depth of quality. And then you're asking me this on a weekend where Barnet are top and they've just kept a 6th consecutive clean sheet, and where Josh Stones has really shown me, along with a few others who hadn't necessarily seen that much of him, just what a difference he really can make. And I do feel a bit. I know how good a manager Neil Ardley is, and how Woking were unbeaten in 9, and they've just gone and had their asses handed to them by York. So everything inside me's pulling and pointing me towards York just now at the moment. But I've said all season, Dean Brennan is hell bent on winning that league. They're putting together some pretty conclusive reasons why they could win the league at the moment. And I just can't write off Forest Green. I know we don't have a card to play here that says that we can sit this one out. But what the strongest thing I'm going to say is if I could sit this out, I would, because I just can't call it. Today, right now, I'll probably go 1 York, 2 Forest Green, 3 Barnet. That's really harsh on Barnet. They could easily win this league. Not easily, but there's lots of reasons why they could win it. I'll tell you what, then. I'll be bold and say I think there'll be less than 3 points between all 3 of them at the end of the season. I don't see it breaking down into a 2-horse race or even somebody running away with it. I think it's these 3 now for the duration, with Oldham doing everything they possibly can to hang on to their shirt tail.
I'm going to come to Sam and Christian as well on your top 3 as well. And then after that, something I do want to discuss, and I think it's another good season to bring up this point, especially with the news in recent weeks. We'll finish up on the top 3, not the top 3, 3 up, 3 down, I should say. Of course, I think it's something that we should all touch on, particularly this season when you look at all 3 of those sides and how well they're doing. I'll quickly say mine then. I'm going to stick with York. I think they've got so much depth and quality for me. It pains me to say it, but when you see things like Stones actually coming in and scoring a hat-trick when Pierce is out injured, that says a lot. The one thing that I am going to say, and I've said this all along. I've said that I think Stones, I'm not saying it's a bad side, and I think it is a good one. I'm saying there was better options for York. I think there's a lot of strikers that could do. I think most strikers in this division would do well in that York side, to be honest, because of the actual depth and quality around you that you've got. But what I will say is you've got Stones, who's just scored a hat-trick now, and I alluded to this on Thursday. You've got Pearce, who's the top goal scorer. Pearce is going to come back after suspension. Stones is on decent form after scoring a hat-trick. What they're going to do now? Are they going to change system? Because if they want to fit both of them in, that's what they're going to have to do. And it goes back to the saying, if something's not broken, don't try and fix it. And for me personally, it's not broken at the moment. Whereas if you've got one striker like that on the bench, if it's Pearce, he's going to be like, I'm the top goal scorer in the division. Why have you got me on the bench? But if it's Stones, it's going to be a case of just scored a hat-trick for you, and now you've benched me. So for me, I think Hinchelwood's got a bit of a problem there for me overall, because I doubt that they'd want to change the system. And this is the issue with this Stones signing for me, and why it's such an odd one overall, although it has clearly weakened Oldham, but I am still going to back them to win the title. Barnet, obviously, I interviewed Dean Brennan, a really, really nice guy, very down to earth. I know on his interviews he can sometimes appear, it's hard to explain, but a little bit rational, perhaps. They're very interesting. If you ever want like entertainment, that's the type of manager that you're going to see after a post-match interview. He's very honest, and he was in my interview as well. I just feel like what you look back at previous years, you look at, in the playoffs where they've bottled it in the past, and do they have what it takes to actually win this title? For me personally, I just feel York have got a bit of a cutting edge on them. And Forest Green, it feels like they're the silent club in this title race, because there's not as much talk about them on Twitter, yet they're always in that title race. They're all in the thick of it, usually second. So you can't write them out off. But the issue for them, for me, is the fact that you've mentioned that they've got a lot of quality in depth. They haven't actually got that much depth overall for me. And when they have key players that have got injured, they've been very fortunate so far this season for me to not have that many injuries. If they start getting hit by injuries, for me, I think they could not fall away from the top three, but I think they could fall away from the title race. So I'm going to say the final date is going to be between York and Barnet, and I think York will win the title. Now, I spoke for a good 5 minutes, so I do apologise there. But Christian, coming to you then, top three.
This is really interesting because I'm Team Forest Green. I just think that the options that they have got, the depth isn't there as such, but the quality certainly is. I come at this and I do like to shoehorn it in as much as possible, having only seen York twice this season, and they did lose to Boston on both occasions. So I appreciate I've not seen York at their best. But I think when you're trying to fit very good square pegs in round holes, you have to worry. I also feel that York, with this massive expectation, every home game now is going to be a big event, and they kind of had a bit of a nosebleed against Sutton the other week, didn't they, with kind of the Will Davies and all of that kicking off. And I don't know, I just feel like York have got one of those in them, if you know what I mean. Forest Green have only lost twice. And they pick up so many late points, especially at home. And in a close race, if you can pick up points that you maybe don't deserve, or you certainly aren't in a position to be getting, that can make the difference, really. I appreciate that they're maybe most exposed if they do have an injury or two. But at the minute, they've got through that without. They're out the trophy. They never got involved in the National League Cup. They're very, very strong at home. Barnet, of course, haven't lost at home either. But for me, Forest Green are my champions. I agree it'll probably go to the last day between two teams, if not all three. Having said all that, I feel Barnet second. They feel like they've got a bit about them to kind of change tack if they need to. I was very impressed with the way that they settled very clearly on the fact that a point was appropriate for them at Boston, and secured it. And it was all positive. The fan base really seemed behind that fact. So by default, really, and for no other reason, I do have York third. So for me, it's Forest Green and then Barnet and then York.
I understand what you're saying. Go on, sorry.
Just a quick, I'm bound to come back to you on this, Christian. We're all, see, my opinion of Rochdale, even now, several months later, is still massively kind of fueled by a performance that I saw them give against my team. And that's why I think I've batted a little bit more perhaps for Rochdale than some of the others have today. Isn't it, in your case, Christian, we're near enough saying the other three of us that we think York might just do it. You've got them third. Is that largely because, and I know it's absolutely bonkers, but Boston have beaten them home and away, haven't they? You've not seen the good version of York in the flesh, have you?
No, that's it. And I did touch on it there. It is difficult when you've not kind of seen them at their best, whereas Forest Green came to Boston very early, won 4-0, but that was more down to the poor level Boston were at very early August. And then did a job on Boston, again in a game that ifs, buts and maybes, but that could have easily been a draw in December. Barnett turned Boston over with a 20-minute comeback in October and then got a good point on Saturday. So I just feel a team that's only lost twice out of 30 games is very, very hard to write off. I think I'd be much more open to a debate as to whether it was fair that I had Barnet above York or vice versa. I'm happy to listen to kind of the experiences of everyone else with York because, Boston have managed to do them twice. But I really do just feel that if Forest Green do stay as fortunate as they've been so far, and we can only call it luck to a certain extent, and then it just becomes fact, doesn't it? They've sustained it. They've had the same few options, but very, very good options. I don't feel they've got the best out of Cardwell yet. Whether that'll come, I'm not sure. Whether they'll quite get the opportunity, I'm not sure. And again, that might depend on what injuries come. I just feel if you've only lost 2 games and you're picking up a lot of points late, that kind of has the taste of title winners. And for sure, Barnet and York, I'll have a debate, and I'll maybe do downplay York a little bit for that fact.
Sam and Rob can speak about their experiences against York, but that's not a discussion I really want to discuss. If anyone remembers that game at our place, absolutely robbed we were. And I'm looking for that revenge later this month against them, hopefully at their place as well. But no, for me, I will allude to that game. For me, games like that's why I personally feel they could go on to win the title, and the fact that they've got so much depth. They didn't feel like they played that well, but they found a way to win. And that's something that's very, very difficult to do. But even the likes of Chesterfield in the past, when we play at home, we're very good against the sides who are doing well in the league. For example, your Bromleys of last year, your Barnets of this year, your Chesterfields, and even your Wrexhams when they went on to win the league. Whereas York came to the show and found a way to win. And that's something that a lot of the top sides really struggle to do. And that's why, for me, not just that reason, but that's a big reason why I looked at that day and saw the celebrations of the York fans and the way they won that game for me and thought, they're going to go on to win this title. And they should do, to be honest, because they've spent a lot more money than those sides around them. And Ugler comes out and says the pressure's not on York this season to go up. For me, in terms of everyone else looking in at York, yes, next season they could go again and try and win the league. But for me, this year, in terms of the actual quality that they've got and not embarrassing themselves, I feel that they've got to win the league now. Maybe not the start of the season, but with the additions they've made throughout the season, signings like the Stone signing for me makes me think that you can't not go on to win this league now, or at least go up through the playoffs. And for me, I think York are the sort of side, if they don't win the league, I think they'd struggle in the playoffs. Whereas I think of Forest Green, I think they'd be more equipped, like you mentioned, Christian, to do better in the playoffs. And even now, it does feel like this year, Barnet must have learned from the mistakes of last year in the playoffs if they didn't go on to win the league. So I am going to go for York to win the league. But I do genuinely think there's a lot of pressure on them. And I do agree with your point, Christian, about I feel that every game now, when teams come up against York, I don't know about you guys, but they're the one side that I would love to beat. Obviously, you want to beat everyone, but for me, and I think everyone else, because they've spent all this money, everyone's going to want to beat them, particularly because they've got such a strong fan base behind them. It's quite a big occasion going there now. And I just feel the pressure's on them. Sam, I know you mentioned your top 3 early, but would you mind repeating it and going in a bit more depth about that?
Yeah, of course. So with the top 3, I kind of got them split into 3 categories. I've got, and it's kind of a key attribute for each team, and it's it basically comes down to what do you think is going to win you the title, and that's kind of this grit, style, and experience. I look at York and I think they've got the standout play style of the three. I think they've got a fluid way of playing, very hard to play against, a lot of control of the ball, very attacking, get the fullbacks up high, and you can get punished. It's a bit risky at times, but if a team, it is a kind of attacking style of football that if you make one defensive error, you will get punished. And Woking showed that. It got shown that at the weekend. We made 2 errors, 2 goals. So York, I think their key attribute that's going to push them to contend for the top of the league is style. When you look at Forest Green, it's the grit they've got, like Rob mentioned earlier, that never say die attitude, the amount of late equalisers, late winners they found this season, it is pretty exceptional. And that is the kind of thing you look at and think, is that team the kind of side, are these results, season-defining results that are going to push you to win the title? I do look at that from a perspective of how much of that is luck, and are these late goals going to soon run dry? And once they do, is it going to get to a point where they do maybe tail off a tiny bit? But until that point, you can only until that point of it happening, you can only look at that and go, that is a gritty team who aren't going to back down at any point. And then you look at the experience side of it, and I look at Barnet, and I think this isn't their first rodeo. Dean Brennan's kept the spine of last season's team. He finished second last year as the manager. They've been in this position before. They know that they know what it takes to compete in this league. They know what it's like to be up in this kind of position, and they're going to be much more well equipped for the mental side of the game than than the other 2 teams. I feel, because within recent years they have been in that position. For me, I think I look at those 3 attributes, and I think I like the style side of it. I like the fact that York have a specific way of playing, that they can go out and they can go and pick a team apart and stay consistent with that. And they have shown that if they do change that, it does play a big part. But for me, if York stick to the style of football they play, I think they will. I think they'll win the league this season. Barnet's experience have got them second in the league last season. I do question Barnet sometimes in the bigger games. We're yet to see really in the recent past how they're going to face up against one of these bigger sides. But so I've got Barnet second. I do think Forest Green, for me, are going to finish third, and I do think that is purely based on the fact that there is a bigger margin for error there with them, in the fact that their luck could run out. They could see a few of these late goals not happen, and that could cost them a few points here and there. But quickly, also, you mentioned the conundrum. It kind of links into the style side of York, about what do York do coming up to the weekend now, when Pearce is coming back, but Stones is off the back of a hat-trick. I look at that and I think, based off what I've said here as well, especially, whatever you do, if you're York, you do not accommodate players. You play these players in this system, and these players, they have to lay down the law basically and say, look, for the sake of winning this league, we need to play this system. If you have to sit on the bench for a game or 2, then so be it. Stones is off the back of a hat trick. I think you can't drop him. Ollie Pearce, if he was maybe being rested, I think it would be a bit more of a conundrum for Hinchelwood. But he has been sent off. He has been suspended. That is off his own back. And Stones has pounced on that opportunity. So I think come the weekends, as long as York play that system and it doesn't really matter who they start up front. But yeah, for me, I've gone all in all York to win the league, Barnet to finish second, Forest Green to finish third.
Now, I know we've been going on for quite a long time, and I do appreciate that, guys. So I do appreciate you staying on. Just one final topic before we can bring things to a close. And it is a topic I feel we do need to discuss, and that is 3 up, 3 down. Now, of course, it's a topic that we've kind of bored to death, I should say. Of course, news recently has come out about all 72 clubs agreeing to sign a letter that the National League have put forward to the EFL to actually add an additional promotion spot. Now, me and Sam discussed this a little bit on Thursday's podcast. Something I want to ask each of you, and I'll start with you, Christian. Do you actually think this is something that realistically could come into fruition at the start of next season?
I think the question you said is will it? And I think the answer is probably not. Purely because, as far as I'm aware, and please put me right if I'm wrong. In essence, this needs to be agreed to by the EFL, and that means the EFL member clubs voting for it. And that is, in essence, Turkey's voting for Christmas. If I was a League Two club, a struggling League Two club, Grimsby Town, not too far away from me, for example, I would be much more fearful that I'm one bad season away from finishing third bottom than I would be thinking, oh, crikey, if we go down, it would be nice to have that extra opportunity. I just can't see it happening. I think, should it happen, the merits are there. I think the National League have been preparing themselves for this for a long time. I think, in hindsight, the decision to carry on playing during COVID and pretty much forcing the National League Premier to do so was to keep that elite tag and keep this door open. But again, to touch back to Boston, and obviously the top end doesn't involve Boston anytime soon. The manager pointed out that, and Graham's obviously someone that's been in the Football League more than the National League, really. He said that if the National League wants to start demanding things and start asking questions of the Football League, it does kind of need to get its own house in order, in a sense. And we are beyond the COVID money scandal. I don't think anyone's going to bring that up, but there was a report there that was commissioned and never published. It's not very kind of open and transparent. It's not very professional, to be honest. He also pointed to the fact that, again, that Boston had to travel to games, etc. We had the farce of the National League Cup and demanding that 16 teams play in that, but we'll give a we'll give a pass to 8 teams that don't want to do it, and then you're putting pressure on the newly promoted teams to get involved. That's this competition force. I just think non-league football, in terms of the clubs, is great and is ready, and the individual sides in question are very much of the standard of the Football League. There's no doubt. I just worry that the organisation of the National League itself does let those clubs down on occasion. And it was really interesting to me to hear someone that's got more of a foot in the Football League camp kind of make that assessment of the National League, which is a bit of a shame because it's not the amateur league it was 40 years ago when it was founded. But I can't see to answer your question, I can't see the EFL voting it in, unfortunately, and therefore it won't happen. I think it would be great, but I don't think, on the balance of things, it's something we're going to see in the immediate short term.
I just don't know why it's taken so long for the National League to actually send a letter to the EFL, to be honest. I thought, when Wrexham win this division, it could have been a case, and I think it could have been pushed a little bit more when you had a club like that with ownership like that at the time. As for you, Rob, of course, we've got another title race this season between 3 sides. Of course, I think whoever it is, it could potentially be that 2 of those 3 don't get promoted this season, and they could feel very hard done by. Do you feel that it could be a case of it starting next season, or do you think it's not going to with the EFL, obviously?
I think it's very unlikely, but it's important that they approach it formally sooner rather than later. That's for sure. I do think all the good cases are there. We've talked about until we're blue in the face. I was just reading, and it didn't appear to be rude there, Christian, while you were speaking. I was listening to you, but I was just reading the 3 pages on this in the non-league paper today, and until now I hadn't seen what the EFL kind of have to say in response. And I think it's Rick Parry, isn't it, who's in charge of the EFL. He said, "We do have to acknowledge the need to look downwards as well as upwards. But the EFL also insists any change has to come as part of a broader package of reforms which benefit all levels of the game." And I think it's fairly well known that the EFL are in their own battle with the Premier League about the amount of money's coming down into the game, and they might not see it as such a priority. I don't think there's any way that they'll just go to the clubs, vote on it, and the clubs will vote turkeys for Christmas, as it were. That's not going to happen. More likely to be a change that's made as a wider part of reforms, and who knows that. And I think this is the fear from Mark Ives and the National League, that if it has to wait for the independent football regulator to come in, then it could be another 3-4 years before it actually gets up high enough on the agenda to come in. So I think that's why they're having a pop at it now, a pitch at it now. In truth, I don't fully understand the football politics and how it works, but I think it's unlikely to come in for next season. But of course, all of us involved in this level of football and doing podcasts and in media as we should, we should all do our bit and get behind it and put football first, as the National League is saying. And we've had our moans and groans, haven't we, about the National League? And you can moan and groan now that it's taken them too long, but at least they're formally getting the campaign underway now.
Sam, finally, anything to add on 3 up, 3 down? I know we spoke a bit about it on Thursday.
Yeah. So we touched on it a bit Thursday, of course, but I think it does. I think we're all in the same boat, really. I think it goes without saying that it should be really an absolute no-brainer. I think the one piece of evidence that we pointed out Thursday, especially, was the quality between the two leagues, the gap between the quality, and you look at the teams that have gone up. You look at how teams that come down into this league almost seem to take it for granted because they don't seem to see the quality gap, and they seem to you see more teams at this level struggle down the bottom after being relegated into this league than go up, although that chain seems to have broken a little bit this season. But more so with the teams that go up into League Two, they're not remotely threatened by relegation at this stage. You look at Bromley, and they've gone up to the EFL, and on paper you'd think they should be finishing probably bottom of that division, but they're nowhere near it. The quality difference between the two divisions are very, very similar. And I feel like if you're the EFL, if you're on a board of directors in the EFL, however it was, I'm not too clued up on how it's structured. I feel like you should be looking at that and you should be thinking, we want these teams that can compete at this level, and we don't want these teams at this level in League Two who are, they're happy to finish 16th, 17th and just be secure. We want these top teams that can come up out of the division, out of the National League, and compete. From a fan perspective as well, if you're like, just off the top of my head, a team like Swindon, for example, they are sitting in that 16th, 17th, 18th position place in League Two, and they have been for a few years now. As a fan of that club, I feel like you can look at it and think, we need a reset. We need to, have a season of some positive. I feel like if you are in that kind of situation, maybe going down to the National League sometimes is maybe for the best. You get a good few seasons in the National League to rebuild your squad, rebuild almost just the feel around the club, get a bit more positive, fight at the top end of a division, and that gets the fans behind you a little bit more. It can be a little bit of a gloomy place for these sides who are, for fans, for these sides who are just kind of competing in this like kind of no man's land that aren't really fighting for anything in League Two. But yeah, all in all, I think, like I said, it's an absolute no-brainer. I think it's something that should come into play, and it's good to finally see that the National League have taken action into trying to make something, make progression and making it happen, rather than it just be speculation that it could or couldn't happen. Because I feel like it's long overdue, really. I think Luke, you mentioned it on Thursday, especially. You pointed out the fact that last season you had the season before last, you had Wrexham and Notts County. It would have been an absolute disgrace if one of those teams were to not go up, if Notts County to not go up through that playoffs. They only just did as well. That would have been an absolute disgrace because both of those teams were more than deserving of promotion. So it kind of, again, I look at this season as well, really, and I think if this season finishes how it looks at the moment, one of these teams are going to miss out, and I don't think they're deserving of that, I think, like I said, it's an absolute no-brainer that it should have been, it should be enforced, really. And I think if you look at it from the integrity of football perspective, I think that only emphasises that. But like you said, if it comes down to teams voting in the EFL, then I feel like short-term security is going to play a massive factor, and I don't see it maybe coming into fruition anytime soon, sadly.
Totally.
Sorry,
yeah, go on.
I was just going to add to your point about teams going up and not struggling. I believe it's the case that no one has ever come straight down. Yeah. Anybody ever has been promoted from into the Football League, and teams have gone up with financial difficulties. Boston went up with a 4-point deduction and stayed up. Also, these things tend to go in cycles of sort of a generation. It was 86, 87 that the first spot was put in, the first promotion spot, and then 2003 for the next one. So again, saying we're overdue, it is kind of that, you're 20 plus years now instead of that kind of 16, 17. It feels a natural progression. And I don't think there's any question that the quality of the teams that go up is deserving. It's football politics. And football politics doesn't change things very quickly, I'm afraid.
Totally agree. Has anyone got anything to add before we round things up?
No, I don't think so. I mean, it's just a really quick footnote on that, and I don't want to sort of bring a negative out of it. If it does happen, I think one of you other guys mentioned about the National League getting its house in order. If I'm honest, I love the playoff format. I know we're all a bit scared about it, what's going on when it first came in, but I love the way it's loaded at the minute. And I think realistically, if the National League got 3 promotion places, it'd probably have to wind its neck in a bit again and say, okay, so the top 2 are going up now. They'd probably have to revert back to 4 teams in the playoffs, wouldn't they? Which would be a shame because I love the current format. But if that's the price we have to pay, then that's the price that we have to pay. But if you didn't do that, then you'd effectively be, you'd be saying that you could finish 7th or 8th and 8th, sorry, yeah, and still go up. So with a 16 playoff system, which would be a bit bonkers, really, wouldn't it? I mean, although Luke, you probably wouldn't mind that because Halifax probably gonna. We've all said they might finish 8th now.
Yeah, innit? We need that 8th spot if that's going to be the case, to be honest. But no, lads, I do really appreciate you coming on tonight. I think it's been a great discussion. I know it's gone on for a long time. I know a lot of you probably didn't expect it to go on, but I'll be honest, I've been enjoying myself speaking to you guys. I do really appreciate you coming on tonight, and best of luck to you all for the rest of the season. Finally, just before I do round things up, would you like to plug your pages? Christian, starting with you.
So you can find me on Twitter. It's at Boston UTD, so United, Boston UTD Stats. But I do put on more wider football things that I've just never changed the handle. I'm more regular on the NL Full-Time podcast, often alongside Rob, and we've got a good team there and a real variety of perspectives. And if you don't want to listen to some commentary, I'm doing Halifax Boston with Radio Lincolnshire on Saturday and do a lot of Boston's away games. I would do the home, but I'm on the tannoy. So again, if you come to Boston, you can't escape me, I'm afraid. So spread widely, but nice to join you for the first time. And hopefully it's the first of many.
Yeah, it certainly will be if you're up for that. Sam, as well, yourself, try to plug your own page as well.
Yeah, of course. You can also find me on Twitter too, Samuel Cole 1115. It's all National League based analysis and basically just my opinion, really, and kind of just speaking on the National League, breaking it down, trying to look in depth in it, articles, threads, a lot. Yeah, so if you like the National League, come check my page out.
Brilliant. And Rob, finally, yourself.
Yeah, at RobShot66 on X or Twitter. NL Full-Time Podcast, as Christian says, at NL Time, NL Full-Time on there. And just to say that our own podcast, so Christian wasn't around for it today, but it's with me, Dickie Wharton, and Brian Flynn of Altrincham, the media maestro from Altrincham. He came on today. So we had a fair chat about them. And that one will be out, I guess, around a similar time as this one. So if you've already watched this and enjoyed it, then maybe go find the NL Full-Time one.
Brilliant. Well, lads, once again, I do really appreciate you coming on tonight. Please check out our sponsors, Cards Accepted. There's a link in the description for you to do that, and you get 50% off your card machine if you do that. No contracts or monthly fees. And remember to like and subscribe, and we will see you next time. Bye for now.